as you can probably see here from the setting. Nice to be here. And on an auspicious day, today is the Nityananda Trayodasi, Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai. So, yeah, well, I'll just mention something that's been on my mind. Somebody got into a conversation, if you will, with somebody who was what I would call kind of like a Manjari police representative, who just here on the eve, if you will, of Nityananda Trayodasi, Nityananda being Balarama himself and the personification of Sakyarasa, and playing such an important role, if you will, in the Sampradaya, as I've explained in detail in Circle of Friends and other times in other places. But by Manjari police, what I mean to say is that he's one of these fellows that asserted that the Sampradaya is only about Manjari Bhav, 99.999%, that's what it is, and that this was determined at Tripurari, the first festival, incorporating festival after the passing of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So I had to say to him that is historically not factual, and theologically it's very problematic as well, or wrong. Just briefly, in light of the fact that we're celebrating Nityananda Prabhu's appearance day, he, as you know, was the beginner, the one who began under the auspices of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his order to spread Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and he did so in Bengal very widely. Saptagram is 7 villages along the bank of the Ganges. That was the very large mercantile community that he liberated, and excuse me, and on therein, for the most part, he uncovered all of his eternal associates, the Dwadasa Gopal, 12 friends from Gaura-lila, and they started lineages and so forth. This is all a very strong influence of Sakyarasa, I mean exclusively Sakyarasa. And it's true that this preceded the Tripurari festival, which was again after the passing of Nityananda Prabhu and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, years after the passing of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and shortly after the disappearance of Nityananda Prabhu, at which time Janava, his consort, became prominent, at which time the Goswami's texts, which asserted tastefully that the acme, if you will, of intimacy with the Absolute is found in Madhurya Rasa, and a particular type of Madhurya Rasa that affords the jiva the closest thing, if you will, to Radha's experience, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to experience as a beautiful theological insight, echoed, of course, in Bengali in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. And that's historically, that's theologically correct, but the idea that it was somehow determined at that time that therefore this sampradaya will be a Manjari sampradaya from here on out, it makes no sense, theologically speaking. Let me come back to that, and first address the historical inaccuracies a little more. It wasn't that all those who were in Sakyarasa, like the associates of Nityananda Prabhu, who remained even after his passing, who had not yet passed, converted or something like that, their sthayi-bhava into Manjari bhava and so forth, and we find quite a bit after that texts like Govinda Balavanataka, Prabhakti Vasarnava, from Sakyarasa lineages, showing its life. And I've gone over the history in Circle of Friends in one chapter to some extent, and by the time that the British Prabhupada informed us that by the time the British had made Calcutta their capital, almost more than half of the population was all associated with the Saptagram community, the Suvarnavanik community, and the Zakirasa. And you can go there today and you can find deities of vrtti Ram, Krishna Balaram, all around the houses where Prabhupada's house was, where he lived, and so forth. So even at that time, how vital it was spiritually, that's another thing, but that holds true for the entirety of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Therefore, the appearance of Bhakti Vinod, which is kind of what the Bhagavad Gita speaks about. I come again in the form of my devotee. When lineage becomes weak, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Evam parampara praptam, imam rajashayo vidu, sakalena mahata yoga nashta, param tapa. And it's important, it's significant, of course, that Bhaktivinoda Thakur in doing so, that amongst the two protagonists of arguably his main book, Jaiva Dharma, one is in Sakya Rasa, one is in Madhurya Rasa, even as Madhurya Rasa is prominent and appropriately so in the text, he didn't exclude Sakya Rasa from Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And of course, we find prominently expressed in the person of my Guru Maharaja, Vishnu Padesi Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, according to his own testimony, supported by the very insightful discourse of Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, who knew him very well, lived with him for many years. Excuse me, and others in Gaudiya Math also, like Kinchana Krishnadas Babaji was widely known of his affinity, and he wrote about it to Sridhar Maharaj. I published his letter to Sridhar Maharaj or Sridhar Maharaj's comments on it in Circle of Friends also. So there's a long history, and it's alive and well. So that's the historical side. Go back to the theological side of it. According to our theology, each jiva has its own svabhav. So it's not that the sampradaya gives you something that you didn't already have, but it gives you by way of giving you the instruments, the tools, the blessings, and so forth, to bring out that which is unmanifest within you, that it may manifest. If it wasn't unmanifest in you, if a tree was not unmanifest within a seed, the trees, there's no tree in a seed. There's no tree in the seed in terms of what we see to be a tree with leaves and branches and fruits and so forth. You can say there's no tree in the seed. That's true. But if you look deeper at it, you say that which is unmanifest within the seed. There's an unmanifest tree. There's no manifest tree in the seed, but there's an unmanifest tree in the seed. And if there was not an unmanifest tree in the seed, it doesn't matter how much water you would pour on it, doesn't matter how much sunlight you would give it, doesn't matter how much fertilizer or good soil you put it in, no tree is ever going to come out of it. It has to be there in an unmanifest form. So sometimes we say there's no, it's not in the jiva, it's not manifest. If it wasn't there unmanifest, it would never manifest. And this isn't only the emphasis of Bhakti Vinod, but at the end of Gopal Champu, which so beautifully highlights Vatsalya Rasa, Sakya Rasa, and of course Madhurya Rasa, as Jiva Goswami retells the Krsna-lila. At the end of the book, he says, he's speaking to advanced devotees here. So those who've read the book and studied the book, I've showcased all the bhavas here, all the rasas here. Pick the one that you're attracted to and use what I've written about to help nourish and bring it out. So Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, as I mentioned, is both deep, and that's evidenced largely by its preoccupation with this ideal of manjari bhav and the internal reasons for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance and so forth, which is very wonderful. But at the same time, it's broad, and its breadth goes so far. What to speak of, including, other Braj rasas? It also has the power to, serve and aid persons who are pursuing bhavas outside of Braj based on their inherent nature as it starts to manifest. So, so historically correct, theologically incorrect. And I was thinking about that this morning, so I share it with you. And in light, to some extent, of the fact that it's Nityananda Trayodasi, and we don't want to push him out of the Sampradaya altogether here. He has a big role to play, and a huge wave of his influence we've all come under, in as much as my Guru Maharaj was empowered by Nityananda Prabhu to do the kind of work that was really synonymous with, or comparatively speaking, comparable to that which Nityananda Prabhu did, and what he's most known for in the Sampradaya, the wide circulation of Gaudiya Vaishnavism and to the downtrodden people. And in the context of that, while telling them about Mahaprabhu and pointing to him and his pursuit of Radha Bhav and the virtues of such and the beauty of such and so forth, his own Bhav, Sakya-bhava, comes into play, and we find that amongst Prabhupada's disciples, so many of them influenced by, they don't all trace it out, they don't know why, but that's their natural affinity. They came to him, they came from backgrounds, from previous lives and so forth. And this is their natural, their atma-svabhava, if you will. So we try to bring some balance with our emphasis on Nityananda Prabhu's contribution in this regard. And I want you to all understand that, because you can run into these Manjari police who don't have any experience of Manjari Bhav whatsoever, but have heard a few things, and then they use it as to weaponize, and champion their own standing, which is more or less a manifestation of Rajaguna, criticizing others by which you feel better about yourself, and you delude yourself into thinking you've become something more than what you are. It's rather unfortunate that such a beautiful thing could be spoken about, and the motivation for which is nothing more than Rajaguna. We don't do that. All right, let's take the questions.
Thanks, Guru Maharaj. So the first question was a follow-up from one of the questions last week at the end from Kanuram.
And he just asked, what is vritti? Is it like a samskara? Vritti.
Vritti is excuse me, like a wave in the ocean of the mind, and an accumulation of vrittis turns into a samskara, a big wave, deep in the ocean. Now, in a samskara, when it becomes ripe, so to speak, it turns into a vasana and becomes actually part of one's psychological disposition and makeup. Whereas a samskara can be there but cannot be fully yet manifest. It starts to manifest as a vasana. So these are technical terms found in texts like Yoga Sutra is probably a good place to look at that. So vritti, impression, enough impressions of the same type turn into a samskara. Samskara becomes right, turns into a vasana. Hope that helps.
The next question is from Krishna Das.
Yes.
Dandavats, good morning, Guru Maharaj. Nice to see you. So my question is in relation to a section of a Circle of Friends in detailing the nighttime pastimes of how Subal is integral in assisting Radha and Krishna's romantic pastimes. And I guess I was just curious as to some of the details of how this plays out. So reading the following, you said, from Radha's hand, the flute is stolen by Jatila, who catches Radha and Krishna together in the pre-dawn hours. Jatila then loses the flute later that morning to the she-monkey Kakati, who is working under Vrinda's direction, and eventually Kakati secretly gives it to Vrinda. Meanwhile, Radha is held captive by Jatila and her son. And then going on in the next paragraph, it said, in disguise, Subal also serves as cover for Radha. As such, he manages to save her from the accusations of Jatila. When Jatila thinks Subal is Radha and brings the disguised Subal before the council of elderly women, claiming she has caught Radha red-handed with Krishna the night before, Subal removes his disguise to the embarrassment of Jatila, and Radha's good name is preserved. So I was wondering, since it sounded like Radharani was captured by Jatila previously, and then, at the latter part, it said that, quote unquote, Radha is actually Subal is being brought before this council. If there's any detail of how they switched in between that time, or if you could maybe elaborate more on some ways that Radharani evades being discovered by Jatila or anyone else.
This is a pastime from Rupa Goswami's drama, Vidagdha Madhava. I think it's Vidagdha Madhava. I've cited it just to make the case that Narmasakas can and have been known to at times participate even in the Nisha Lila, the nighttime Lila, which may not be an everyday occurrence, every night occurrence, but I would have to look at that. You can look at it yourself, look up Vidagdha Madhava, but if it's said there that Jatila caught Radharani, but then I guess your question is that, but then Subal, dressed as Radharani, appeared in the assembly, and so somehow they switched out the back door or in the front door. And I don't recall if any such details are given. It doesn't take a lot of imagination how they might have switched places. It's a very nice Lila in many respects. So you can look there. What else?
Thank you.
The next question is from Shraddha.
Shraddha sent this question. Pranams Gurudev. On this special day, any words on Lord Nityananda, such as the following, would be medicinal to the soul and body, especially since my serious cough confines me to home and I'm not able to offer to Lord Nitai at our main temple. Words on his advent, his moon-like complexion being reflective of Lord Gauranga's sun complexion. Thirdly, how Lord Nityananda guides souls through the forest of the spiritual world to meet the Supreme Lord. And fourthly, how enlightenment from the Lord directly would be too intense for most souls, being like the sun, which is why the moon-like light from Sri Gurudev is preferred. Thank you. Jai Gaura Nitai.
I'll speak on the latter momentarily. It's sometimes thought that Nityananda Prabhu personifies the Guru Tattva, and there's good logic behind that. In that Nityananda Prabhu is Krishna and he serves Krishna. So the Guru is representative of Krishna. Sakshad Harite, and all the Shastras say he's directly Krishna. Kintu Prabhu Priya, but he's a servant, but he's dear to Krishna. How can you be Krishna and be dear to Krishna? Well, Nityananda Prabhu is an example of that. He is Krishna. He's Vishnu Tattva, but he's a servant of Krishna at the same time, right? Of course, the Guru is Krishna representatively speaking, like the ambassador to a country is to be treated like the president or the prime minister of the country that he represents, because he or she represents that station. So a little bit different, but Nityananda Prabhu is sometimes described, or Balarama, as the original Guru. Guru Tattva originates from him, Akanda Guru Tattva. So when we look at that in relation to the idea that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is brilliant as the sun, Nityananda Prabhu is the reflection, like the moon, which is soothing. And as the question was asked, it seems to indicate from the question that perhaps we need the reflective light of Nityananda Prabhu to be able to really look at the sun of all that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is about. And there's some truth to that. Narottam Thakur sings beautifully about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his Antya-lila in the Gambhira. He says, what is that song? He says, Lala Sumayi, he says, anyway, he speaks about the depth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's internal absorption, and as he does so, he then turns to Nityananda and says, "Arakobe nitai chande karuna hoibe, samsara vasana kobe tucha hoibe." That in order to enter into that depth of what he's talking about, we have to go through Nityananda Prabhu. It's said in Vrindavan Das Thakur's pen, through his pen, Chaitanya Bhagavat, that Nityananda Prabhu brought the Gopi Bhav to the world. So he really understood Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's internal reality and put focus on it, not in a theological way by writing. That was not his contribution. That came from the Goswamis, but he put all the focus on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's a tenet, a foundational tenet of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, that there's no rasa of Braj available without going through Nityananda Prabhu. So, your analogy there, it holds to some extent. But if we take that analogy and we extend it to the Guru, who is arguably representative of Nityananda Prabhu, you could look at him as representative of Radha as you go further into Madhurya Rasa. That's fine too. But Puddipachita Maharaj gave a nice example. And that is that in order to, that the lotus grows out of the mud, but in the water. And it's surrounded, I think this was his example, it's surrounded by the water. Without the water, if the lotus was just to have the sun, it would wilt. It couldn't take it. So the Guru is like the water around the lotus that enables it to properly approach the sun. So the analogy, extending it to the Guru as I have, it applies in many respects to Nityananda Prabhu. And of course, as I said earlier, he's characterized by his wide dissemination of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, putting it on the map, declaring who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is, which was a question in the minds of many of his associates. And with regard to his appearance that you've asked about, of course, he appeared in the Brahmin family of Hadai Pandit and what's his wife's name, my mother's name, I forget recall at the moment. Hadai Pandit in Ek Chakra, which
Padmavati.
Is
Padmavati was his mother.
Padmavati, yes, thank you. In Ek Chakra, which is within the Gauda Mandala, and it's said that at an early age, a sannyasi came and was properly honored by Hadai Pandit. And at the time of his departure, Hadai Pandit appropriately, according to decorum, and asked if there's any gift he could offer him. And the sannyasi asked for his son, to which Hadai Pandit passed out is passing out is likened to Ram's father. The idea of Ram's departure. But true to Dharma, he couldn't go back on his word. So he did give his son to that sannyasi who traveled with him. There are different opinions about who that sannyasi is, but in the course of the travels, I think it's fairly conclusive that Nityananda Prabhu became a disciple of Lakshmipati Tirtha. Lakshmipati Tirtha was a prominent Vaishnava in the Madhva Sampradaya. There's a connection between the Madhva Sampradaya and the Gaudiya Sampradaya. By extension, we say Madhavendra Puri was influenced by the same Sampradaya, but it wouldn't appear that he was necessarily initiated in that Sampradaya, carrying, as he does, the name Puri, that sannyas name, when all the sannyasis in the Madhva Sampradaya are named Tirtha. But Lakshmipati Tirtha had an influence, let us say, as a Siksha Guru on Madhavendra Puri. But here's a direct link, you can say, to Nityananda Prabhu with the Madhva Sampradaya. So we call it the Madhva, Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. And of course, Nityananda Prabhu traveled extensively with that sannyasi, and arguably waiting for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to make his appearance, for Krishna to make his appearance in Navadvip. And after the appearance, and just at the point where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began to disclose himself and remove the covering of his being a Pandit and wasting his life in punditry and so forth, to the dismay of the Vaishnavas who all loved him, but felt he was wasting his time not taking up the Sankirtan and so forth. He told them, one day I'll become the best of all the Vaishnavas. And just how proud this boy is. Oh, goodness. But at the time where after he took his received initiation from Ishwar Puri, and began to manifest himself as a Vaishnava, and the best of Vaishnavas, as he predicted. So it was at that time Nityananda Prabhu said to have been in Vrindavan, and all of the deities in all of the temples seemed absent, although the Murti form was there. They seemed absent in substance. So he concluded, Swami Bhagavan must now be manifesting on earth somewhere, and all of them are to be found in him. That is Swami Bhagavan. So he went to Navadvip, and there he found Nimai Pandit. Appeared before him to Nimai Pandit in a dream on a chariot with a flag with the tal palm from Taliban, which was from which you can make an intoxicating drink, which was one of the favorites of Balarama, that drink. And that's why he was involved, so much involved, also in the slaying of Aghasura, who closed the liquor shop, if you will. No Vaishnava could drink from there. Not that they drink. They didn't drink afterwards, except for probably Nityananda or Balarama. That's another part of the Gaura-lila. But he carried the tal palm on his flag, on his chariot, calling Chaitanya Mahaprabhu out. So this is the second appearance, if you will. The birth is one thing, but the appearance in Gaura-lila, that's when the Lila now is complete in terms of its intent to disseminate the Braj Bhakti. And without Nityananda Prabhu, it was incomplete. It was in waiting. It was assembling. With that parting place, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu emphasized this to his disciples. Now everything's complete, and so the mission went, and the wide circulation and distribution began. So these are some thoughts in relation to your question. We would not have a Gaudiya Sampradaya without Nityananda Ram. That's for sure. Nityananda Ram. So let's take some more questions.
So there was a follow-up to this, Guru Maharaj.
Oh, just from Uddhava asked if Hadai Pandit is Vasudeva.
I don't think that Kavi Kanapur identifies him as such, and I haven't seen it in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's book either. I don't think they've taken the time to do that, or look that far into the issue. So you could posit that. It makes sense. Balaram, son of Vasudeva. Yeah. That's how we look at it. Yeah, he's a son. But he's raised by Nanda and Yasoda, and by Vasudeva and Devaki's own admission, he's more their son than he is our son. So formality is one thing, and substance is often another thing, right? So it might be to take a little something away from, but then, if you want to identify Jagannath Mishra with Nanda Maharaj, which I think is appropriate, how can you identify him with Hadai Pandit? But he left Hadai Pandit, so it makes sense. We make him Vasudeva, why not? And then he left, right? As Balaram left also from Mathura. Vasudeva ki jai, Devaki ki jai.
The next question is from Shandasi.
Yes.
Hare Krishna. So it came up in book club today. We were in the chapter of Brahma's Bewildered, and we were talking about how Balaram had mixed feelings after Krishna explained everything to his brother. And we just wanted a little bit of elaboration of how he chose to stay home and not witness all the things that were going on with Brahma. If you could maybe give a little bit more explanation, because I was looking again where Ram, whose name indicates that he gives pleasure to Krishna and his friends, and how he kind of went within, and I was hoping for more explanation on that. Thank you.
Well, it's not that he chose not to be present, but circumstance warranted that he not be present on the day of the slaying of Aghasura, subsequent to which Brahma appeared, and the Brahma Vimohan-lila was set in motion. But it was said to be, I think, a calendar day within the month that corresponded with the stellar arrangement of his own annual birth. And so it appears from this, and from the Gaura-lila as well, which he wasn't a participant in until after Krishna was within the coils of Gaura, that in the Braj community, that the many birthdays were celebrated every month. That may have been special for Balaram. But because of that, he was held back by the power of Vatsalya Ras, and his Sakya Ras was checked, even though he has some Vatsalya Ras in his emotional composition. So he didn't choose not to go. Aside from that, this Leela illustrates a very important point, the Brahma Vimohan Leela, a number of them, but one of them is that there is nowhere in Bhagavan's Leelas, including Vaikuntha, where there is a greater expression of Aishvarya, majesty. There's three reasons why Rupa Goswami says that while in Dwarka, Krishna is perfect. In Mathura, he's more perfect. In Vrindavan, he's most perfect. So what does that mean? How do you make that what is it? Calculation. He gives an answer to this. I believe it's in Laghu Bhagavatamrita. He says, why? Because in Vrindavan, we find the full measure of Krishna's mercy. Example of that would be Putana. Outside of Vrindavan, Krishna slayed many demons, but they didn't get to become eternal mothers as a result of that. That was very bewildering to Uddhava. My gosh, how could, he said, given that, who would in the right mind would take shelter of anyone other than Krishna? In Vrindavan, this Krishna. So he showed the full measure of mercy there. And the full measure of Madhurya, well, there's no question about that. The queens of Dwarka testify to that themselves. They experienced that sometimes at night, Krishna's calling out the names of Radha and Lalita and Shaka and the gopis, even though they're married. He's married to the queens. They know. There are other instances in which they also acknowledge the superiority, if you will, of Braj. What to speak of its superiority in this regard over Vaikuntha, where Lakshmi is there as a single Lakshmi. In Vrindavan, there's thousands of Lakshmis, and the quality of their Madhurya is also extraordinary. So it's very clear that there's nowhere there Madhurya is more perfect. But the interesting thing, of course, is that Rupa Goswami says, and there's nowhere where the Aishvarya is more fully manifest. And this is the example of that, the Brahma Mohan Lila, where Krishna, Narayan shows universes coming from him, Krishna shows Narayans coming from him, from whom universes are coming, and so on. So, and while we refer to this Lila as the Brahma Vimohan Lila, it can also be called the Ram Vimohan Lila, Ram Mohan Lila, because Ram himself, it was hidden from Ram by Krishna's arrangement because he wasn't there on that day when it all began, if you will. And then Krishna manifested himself as all the boys and so forth, and went on with the Lila. And he covered Ram from knowing it. Now, one of the reasons he covered Ram in the Prakat Lila from knowing what was taking place, although he's omniscient, he's God, why didn't he know? Because Krishna's power covered him. And as Krishna began to remove the coverings after 1 year, and the manifestation of that is that Balarama began to notice, what's going on here? Why are these cowherd men so attached to these boys and these cows so attached to these calves that have already been weaned, and they're neglecting their other calves, and they want to get, what's going on here? He started to see this. It's not that was happening for the first time in a year, but he started to notice it because the layers of covering that Krishna put on him so that he wouldn't know what happened began to recede. So why did he do that? Because in the Prakat Lila, the Bhagavad wants to show us what is the emotional composition of Balaram, and it's threefold. It's defined by the emotion which is prominent, which is Sakya. But it's a form of what we call Sankul Bhav. That means it's combined also with Dasya and Vatsalya. So in this Leela, it's shown by the way Ram reacts to the uncovering. His mind is blown. What Krishna's done, he realizes what Krishna's done at this point. And so then he makes a prayer to Krishna, which is in Dasya Rasa. So we see, Dasya Rasa is part of his composition. This way the Bhagavatam teaches us something about Ram's emotional life, his emotional makeup, if you will, in the context of this. That's one way to understand. Does that help?
Very much so. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for the question. Jai Ram, Jai Ram.
Okay. The
What
next question is from Chittahari.
And Chittahari says, Guru Maharaj, you have used the term dravya to describe the jiva as an independent substance. And I'm wondering if this is the same as a vastu?
I'd have to look at it. I don't think they're entirely synonymous. I'd have to look that up. I really don't. I'd have to look up the Sanskrit synonyms. Vastu, and I could look it up quickly, perhaps here. Let's see. I guess it's fairly similar. You can say vastu means object and item. But the elements, for example, are referred to as dravyas. Things are dravyas, and people can be dravyas. So let me get back to where we were here. Without a little further research, I'm reluctant to use the term in that way. I use the term that Jiva Goswami uses in the Pranama, referring to the jiva as a special type of dravya, because it's self-aware. Typically, dravyas are not, things that are not self-aware. Here's something that's not a thing, but self-aware, but it's a dravya. All right, what else?
The next question is from Chana.
Bhaktin Jana.
Bhaktin Chana.
Bhaktin who?
Chana? I hope I'm getting that right.
She's with the Prabhu.
Oh, okay. All right.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. My question is about Varaha-dev. Today we are actually observing Varaha-dev's appearance day in the Balkans in Europe. So my question is, because I've heard devotees say that Varaha-dev came as has a form of a boar, because boars go to dirty places. And other devotees have told me that we cannot know why he exactly took the shape of a boar, why Krishna came as a boar. So is that a secret, or do we have that information? Why a boar? I'm not learned in that, so.
Well, I think that the first group is more accurate. Krishna takes forms that are appropriate to the circumstances required, right? Why did he take the form of Nrsimhadev? Well, I think we can answer that question, right?
Yes.
There were so many circumstances that preceded and affected his devotee Prahlad. So in consideration of those circumstances, he appeared in a way to counteract all the blessings that Hiranyakasipu had, that he wouldn't be slain in the water or in the land or by any animal or any human and by any weapon and so on and so forth. So this holds true for all of the appearances of all the avatars from Narayan, that they appear in forms that are suitable to circumstances. So I think that it's said that the boars or pigs, right? They go to dirty places. Of course, those places are dirty from our vantage point, but for them, it's quite nice. But the earth is said to have been sent to a Platonic region or something, right? And so the boar went there. Makes sense. So I would go with I think their devotees are wrong to think we can't know why Krishna or God appears in any particular form. That statement that you ask about would refer to all the avatars then, but we can see very obviously, as I mentioned, referring to Nrsimhadev, we can know the reasons why. So why can we not know the reasons about the Varaha avatar? And those reasons have been given by some acharyas also, or that particular reason. The boar was in a suitable position to lift earth, suitable form to take to lift the earth from the position it had fallen into. Okay? Varaha-dev ki jai.
Thank you very much.
Haribol.
Haribol.
What else?
The next question is from Ananta Govinda.
And he wrote in the chat, can you kindly elaborate on Srila Prabhupada's connection to Lord Nityananda's lineage? I remember you mentioning Udaran Dutt Thakur's heritage in Prabhupada's family.
Yes, Prabhupada's family was the patron saint, if you will, from the eternal associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for their family was Udaran Datta Thakur. Udaran Datta Thakur was the right-hand man of Nityananda Prabhu for outreach. And he's sometimes referred to as Patita Patita Pavan Udaran Datta. The most magnanimous of the magnanimous, and charitably or magnanimously disposed towards fallen people. So the friend of the fallen, of I should say the pavan, the friend of the most fallen. This is what it means. And he was a friend both in a practical, everyday sense, and of course in a deep spiritual sense. Udaran Datta Thakur was very was a well-off person, and I think he arranged about what would be equivalent to about 10 acres of kitchens for cooking to feed people during the famine. Gave houses to people, shelter, and so forth. The whole community that he was part of, the Varna mercantile community, had been had lost their social status within Hinduism by the decree of Balal Sain, which was inappropriate, but it happened. And Nityananda Prabhu came and elevated them beyond the Varnashram, turning them into Vaishnavas in Sakirasa and Nityananda and Harida and Udaran Datta Thakur was, as I say, his main helper in that regard. And Prabhupada's family was associated with them. So annually they would make a pilgrimage, Prabhupada and his family, to Udaran Datta Pur, where the original preaching center of Udaran Datta Thakur was established. His deities are there and so forth. There's a letter that Prabhupada wrote also. It's available. It's been in the database that contains all of Prabhupada's writings. A letter to the Mahant there, the leadership there, where Prabhupada's asking how much land is required so that the deities of Udaran Datta Thakur can always have enough land. It means that they can always have enough food as long as there's water. Prabhupada wanted to donate land to make sure that the Udaran Datta Thakur's Sripad, his preaching center and deities, would always be preserved, taken care of, and so on and so forth. There was some subsequent correspondence. I don't know what came of it, but they were very respectful, very appreciative of Prabhupada's desires. And so it's an example of his lifelong affinity for Udaran Datta Thakur. So it's significant. Pujapad Maharaj brought it up as a significant piece of evidence to the puzzle of Prabhupada's own ideal. So I brought it up at different times. I would say that as Nityananda Prabhu was very involved in wide distribution of Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and well, his right-hand man, Udaran Datta Thakur, was too. If you look at Gaura-lila Pandit, another one of Nityananda Prabhu's men, he was very introverted. Whereas Udaran Datta Thakur was very extroverted. The introversion, if you will, of Gaura-lila Pandit resulted in the manifestation of Gaura deities in the beginning of that worship, which has gone everywhere. So he played a big role too, if you will, in this regard. It's said that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu came after they had told him to start worshiping carved deities of themselves, start worshiping them. This is the beginning of the worship of Gaura. They came to him, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you're laboring so hard in your attempt to serve us. cooking so elaborately and so on and so forth. That's not required for this kind of deity worship. You just give some, little leafy vegetables, some water, that will be sufficient. And Gurudeva said, anybody can do that. So Mahaprabhu said, yes, by your blessing, anybody can do that. And Gaura-lila deities have gone all over the world. Hadai Pandit ki jai. That's how that happened. But at any rate, comparatively, Udarananda Thakur was very outgoing and actively involved in wide circulation, as my Guru Maharaj was as well. So we see that influence in him. There's a famous picture of Udarananda Thakur, preserved, a painting, I guess that you could say, that has been preserved, and it's circulated. We used to keep it on the altar in Madhavan. And there are descriptions of him in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavata also. But yeah, that's just one of the very powerful Sakyarasa lineages that were the extension of which the community connected with was stretched all the way into, as I said earlier, Calcutta. So there's some elaboration. I hope that helps.
So the next question is from Krishna Das. There's another question.
Okay.
Dandavats Pranama, Guru Maharaj. My next question is, I was wondering, is the love that the manjaris have for Srimati Radharani part of their sthayi-bhava, since it is, so constant, or is it a samskara? Because I've heard it sometimes said that, well, most Brajvasis have Krishna as their sole Vishaya Lambana, since the manjaris favor Radharani more than Krishna, and their love is so fixed and consistent that this would include Radharani as well as part of the Vishaya, and that this would constitute a unique sthayi-bhava. I was wondering if you could comment on this.
Well, sthayi-bhava means sthayi-bhava for Krishna. Krishna is the object of love for all of the Braj-rasas. So the devotees in the different rasas, they're the ashraya lambana. They are the shelter of the love, the personification of love, the holder of that love. And Krishna is the Vishaya lambana. Vishaya means object, is the object of that love, right? So Krishna is the object of everyone's love. Now, having said that and explained the different sthayi-bhavas in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami seems to answer a question that comes in his own mind, or that might come in the minds of his readers. That you talked about this Braj, where all the love is centered on Krishna, but what is the nature of the love between one another? What's the nature of the love between Krishna or Nanda and Yasoda, or so on and so forth? One friend to another friend, one gopi to another friend. And Rupa Goswami answers his own question or thought by referring to it as vrtti. Surit means friend, so love of the friend. And there he explains that the way this vrtti works is that that you have three instances. One instance is that the devotee loves Krishna and the devotee loves his friend, and he loves Krishna more than the friend. Second instance is that the devotee loves Krishna and the friend equally. And in each of these two instances, the sthayi-bhava is for Krishna, and the love of the friend is a samskara or vyabhichari-bhava, same thing, which comes and goes, and its purpose is to augment, to nourish, embellish the dominant emotion, the sthayi-bhava. Now, having said that, there are prominent instances in which we find this dynamic, where one type of gopi, for example, we find this in Madhurya Rasa, it could be elsewhere, but this is a prominent example. One gopi loves Krishna a little more than a friend, or you have gopis like Lalita Visakha, they love Krishna and Ram equally. Sama Sneharika, equal. They love Ram and Radha Krishna equally. But then Goswami says that there's a third example. And this is prominently played out also in Madhurya Rasa, but this is not exclusive to Madhurya Rasa. There are prominent examples, like I've said, of equal loving of Radha and Krishna. Or Dhanishta loves Krishna, but loves the friend a little bit less. So the other third instance we have to talk about this is where the devotee likes the friend a little more than Krishna. How do we look at that, right? And Rupa Goswami says this is called bhavolas. So I mean, it's like an ulas, an exaltation of the bhava. And in that circumstance, when that happens, he said, rather than the sanchari-bhava nourishing the sthayi-bhava nourishes what, in other instances, works like a sanchari-bhava. So it would, because the manjaris like Radha more than Krishna, in a sense, that they're not willing to have intimate, direct relationships with Krishna. Instead, they want to serve Radha, and they're fixed on that. They want her to have them. They don't want to get, even if she asked them to, they don't want that. This is their extreme position. So you could say that they like Krishna more than Radha more than Krishna. There's a way of talking about it like that. That's, they're fully in love with Krishna. Radha and Krishna are one soul and two bodies. So, right, it's just lila. It's a play. So they like Radha in the play a little more than Krishna, and so their love for Krishna, they have romantic feelings for Krishna, but they're suppressed by the power of their serving disposition as handmaidens of Radha. It doesn't manifest. It's suppressed by that. It's there, but suppressed. So their sthayi-bhava is for Krishna, but it nourishes their affection for Radha, which in other instances would be the reverse. The affection for the friend, Radha, would nourish their love for Krishna. So there's a reverse effect. So given that reverse effect, theologians, some have made the argument that that in the bhava of the manjari, that Krishna and Radha together have taken the role of the Vishayalambana, the object of love. So I mean, you could make that argument. I've written about it. I've been a nice article about it on the Harmonist. I don't know how to refer you to. You could look up bhavolas in the search engine. You'll find a nice article on it, which goes in a little more detail explaining what I have. So, I mean, but it's a technical point. I mean, you're going to worship Radha and Krishna, right? That's not going to change. You're going to worship Radha and Krishna. If you want Madhurya Rasa, if you want to. So, yeah. Hope that
Thank you very much, Guru Maharaj.
Yeah, so I guess we come to the end there with that. So nice to be with all of you again. Hope to be with you again next week. Nityananda Trayodasi Mahamotsavatiti ki jai. Gaur Premanande.
Haribol. Srila Guru Maharaj ki jai. So yeah, thank you everybody. We do have a couple more questions, I think. So you'll be first next week, and as always, if anyone has any questions, just let us know and we'll add you to the list. So have a nice week.